Hey, it's Frank here with 4D Honeybee, and I'm just going to do a quick check of the honey supers on this hive. It's September 10th, and this hive has been doing very well. They've built out one super, probably I'd say between 6 to 8 frames full of honey. Also glued the inner lid to the telescoping lid. Always take a quick look for the queen on the lid. Never seen her there, but you never know. And yeah, so I just want to take a look at how they're doing. It's September 10th, and I want to let this hive produce honey for about another 2 weeks for sure, maybe 3 weeks. Based on the forecast, we've got some pleasant weather ahead. So I want to, they've got probably close to 10 frames of capped honey in the main bodies of the hive in the brood chambers below. So they probably have enough honey for themselves to make the winter. I will feed them as soon as I remove the honey supers. I will probably treat for mites and then feed them into the winter, a 2-to-1 sugar to water ratio. And you can look at what I've done. I've put in 9 frames, spaced out 9 frames here. And the reason why I've done that is I wanted them to draw out the comb wider than the width of the frames, and they've done that very nicely here. I will take a quick look at a couple of frames here and then look at the second box, the box below, because that box is just one that had a little bit of drawn comb out, but for the most part this box on top has been on longer than the box underneath. Follow me? So I just want to see how they're all doing. Hopefully, I'd like to be able to get around 40 pounds of honey out of here. If we're taking maybe between 4 and 6 pounds of honey per frame, that would mean I'd have to have 10 frames drawn out and capped for this to work. You can see they're just starting to draw out the end frame there. I wouldn't expect that to be all that great. So this box I started by putting 8 frames in, and right off the bat a bunch of YouTubers told me that that wasn't going to work, they were going to make a mess of it, and they were right. They did make a mess, and I had to revert to back to 8 frames right away. See, 8 frames they will draw out. This one isn't drawn out much past the edge of the frame because they're just drawing out the next one much further. So have a look at it here. They still have room to work in between these 2 frames, but look at how far this next frame is drawn out. It's really quite a masterpiece here. And it is heavy. Look at that. Like that might be 8 to 10 pounds of honey on this one. Capping it off, and you can see how wide they're building it beyond the frame. Again, because I don't use a knife to uncap it, I just use a roller. So it lends itself nicely. Having the roller lends itself nicely to having wider comb built out of the frames, because I'm not losing a bunch of wax by cutting it. I don't have to cut it along the edge of the frame. I'm just puncturing it. So having more comb built out means I get more honey per frame, and it is heavy. Boy oh boy, this has got to be another 8 to 10 pounds of honey. You can see the drone comb on the bottom. I do not use a queen excluder. So I don't use a queen excluder because last year I did use a queen excluder and the bees did not come up. So as soon as I took the excluder off, they started coming up. So of course, when that happens, you do take the risk that that your queen can come up here and lay, and she has. So I will get rid of that bit of drone comb that there is there. You can see it here on the bottom. Sorry guys, but you gotta go. And hopefully the bees will clean up the rest of it. Again, that's a small price. Even if you harvested that frame as it is, that's still easy. You just basically take off that drone comb before you do the extraction of the honey. You make sure it's nice and clean. You remove all the bee guts out of it, larvae, whatever. And that way you know you won't have any in your honey. Another very heavy frame of mostly capped honey. Okay, so I'm going to do the cleanup on the bottom of this one too. Sorry to kill you, drones, but you're not going to have much of a life anyway. It is all drone comb that they've put on the bottom. I do see a couple of sort of cups that are in the position of queen cells here, but I highly doubt they are in swarm mode right now. Try and clean off this burr comb too, so that the burr comb haters don't get on my case too much. It is the right thing to do anyway, I do know that. And yes, it kind of seems like it's falling to the ground, but I actually have a pallet down there to catch this stuff. And I do pick it up and take it back. As a matter of fact, I rendered my first wax this week. And it ain't much, but it was fun. Probably got enough to make a bar of soap or some candles, but my wife will take over the wax from that point. So I'm going to look at a couple more frames. Going to turn this camera off so that the video isn't too long. It's the second box that's going to be really interesting to look at, because the second box was a box that I took from another troubled hives. It had some drawn out comb. I'm hoping that these guys have exploded that drawn out comb. And if they build the second box as nicely as they build the first box, see, this box has got maybe up to 8 frames. It's going to be 8 frames of capped honey, all coming in between 6 to 8 pounds conservatively. So, you know, I'm looking at 48, 50 pounds of honey in this top box. If I could do the same down below, I'll have a tremendous harvest. I tend to doubt it though, but we're going to have a look right now. Okay, so we're looking at the second honey super chamber now. And the bees are starting to get a little impatient here, what I'm noticing. They have built some bridge comb here between a couple of frames that are just spaced too widely apart. I didn't do a good job of spacing these, boy oh boy. And that has allowed them to build some bridge comb in between the frames, and that might affect what they've done for honey production. So far, they really haven't produced anything here as far as building out the frames, building out the comb, and making honey. Now they are working on it, but here's where my mistake has cost me and the bees. See this big hunk of burr comb there? We'll get rid of it. I will pick that up later. And they're drawing it out nicely. They are putting some honey in here, but there's probably not going to be anything close to a harvest coming off of these frames. It's September 10th, and there's just not enough time to evaporate that nectar into honey and then cap it, I think. I'm not exactly an expert at it, but I mean, in a week it's beautifully drawn out. There's just not any nectar going in there right now. They seem to be just continuing to build this out, draw this out, and then they're content to fill the top super with the honey and work on capping that off, which is fine with me. See, there is just a little bit of nectar in here. Nice number of bees though. Take a look at a couple more frames and then we'll put this box back together. I'll do a better job at spacing them. As you can see here, again, I've done 9 frames up here, not 10, but the spacing is poor. Look at that. I've got a frame touching there, and then, you know, over 1/4 of an inch there. And that's how the whole box was. So that's why they built that bridge comb. And it's too bad. I mean, the bridge comb just takes a little bit of their energy away because you're having them build wax that they don't really need to. But it's just bad beekeeping on my part. So if you're going to do those 8 frames as opposed to 10. I recommend it because that top brood box is doing really well. Just take the extra time you need to space them, or buy a spacer. There are spacers available at most beekeeping supply places for $5. I was too cheap to buy it, and I figured once you space them once, they're set forever. And that is true, but that wasn't the case for this one. Probably because I took this from another hive that was struggling, and they could have moved in transit. That's my story, and I'm sticking to it. Or it could have just been not paying attention. So that's it. Looks like I will get, right now, as of now, it's September 15th, or sorry, it's September 10th. I want to give them another 2 to 3 weeks of honey. I'd say I'm probably looking at about a, between a conservatively 35 to 50 pound harvest. Maybe not quite that much, maybe more in the area of 40. Which is good. Last year I did 75 pounds in my first year, but both my hives died. So it was a success and a failure. This year, my #1 goal is to have a 100% survival rate as far as my bees into next year. I would like to take some honey though. So sometimes you can't have both in the world of beekeeping. I'm going to give it a shot and see what happens. Get off of there. So thanks for joining me. It's Frank at 4D Honeybee.